Good evening to everyone on Zoom and on Frequency. We're going to start with the Power Hour Tech Talk with our special guest, Dick, ZS6 Bravo Uniform November. And Dick will be keeping us entertained this evening and teaching us all about digital smart technology for amateur radio, or D-STAR as the short-term acronym. Just to tell you a little bit about Dick. Dick was originally licensed in 1971 as a Golf 3 Zulu X-ray Quebec. And in 1974 through to 1980, he was a ZS5 a Zulu X-ray. And then from 1980 onwards, a ZS6 Bravo Uniform November. So you can see Dick's got a lot of history under his arm there and has been around. He operates primarily from a farm out 65 kilometers southeast of Johannesburg, and his interests include classical SSB operation on the HF bands, weak signal working on VHF bands, and RAG2 and QSOs. But if the demand is there, he will speed up and do 5.9 and 9 QSOs. He can also is interested in technical issues, plastics farming, amateur radio history, Africa, and world affairs. He is semi-retired, but he was the chairman of a polymer trading company based in Johannesburg, and semi-retired means he's probably still active there. And I hear Dick all the time calling out for anybody out there on D-Star. So at this point in time, I'd like to hand over to Dick to take it away. Dick, we're listening.
Okay, thanks very much, Keith, and a very good evening to all my listeners out there. And really, just to take a few steps back, Keith mentioned I was a classical ham radio operator. I'm active on all bands from 160 meters up to 23 cents. But I became aware some years ago that friends of mine that I'd known over the air for many years were moving out of their classic family homes and moving into sort of lock up and go, retirement villages, cluster housing, and they were regretfully going off the air. Dick, we can't put up an antenna. Dick, the noise level here is something else. And so that got me interested in how do you keep your window on the world open when you downsize? And just to give you a bit of a picture here, on the one side of this screen, you can see my wife and I have a small farm out on the far side of Nigel, and we've got 36 hectares there. No planning restrictions, nobody to complain about aerials. We're off the grid completely. There's no noise. My nearest neighbor is 2 kilometers away. And in the background there, you can just see my tower and a TH5 on it and a 2-meter Yagi on top of that. So that is you might say, a classic ham radio scenario. Wonderful. You can go on to 10 meters. I was on 10 meters at this time last night and work the world very, very comfortably. But I too am getting older, and life on the farm, while it would be good if it went forever, it's not going to do that. And about 3 years ago, my wife and I bought a townhouse, a lock up and go, in the Dower Glen suburb of Edenvale on the eastern side of Joburg. It's about a kilometre from the N3. And that's what it looks like on Google Maps. And our place is there. I'm just circling the cursor there. And my word, when I threw a bit of wire out, the noise level was S8, S9, even on 2 meters, which is my preferred urban band, as you might say. It was S7 on 2 meters. So all possibilities to work long distance tropo, meteor scatter, that sort of thing just flew out of the window here. And so I wanted to look for another solution. HF is out. As well, of course, there's the antenna issue. I mean, just look at all those guys. They're all round the corner. I put up a 2 meter Yagi, horizontally polarized. And my technique there is it's on the side of the garage, and I increase its height by 1 meter a month. It just edge it up. But the noise level is unbelievable. On most of those houses, if you look carefully, you can see solar panels. They're festooned with LED lights. It's a radio ham's nightmare. My wife loves it. It's a lock up and go. It's a radio ham's nightmare. So thinking about this, and my own equipment here was I had an ICOM 9700, and it's got a button on it that says DR. And when I pushed that button, there was a clicking of relays and the screen changed. And oh, my word, it really did look exciting. And that's D-Star. These ICOM rigs have D-Star. And noting that I don't know whether ICOM is the most popular manufacturer in who sells in South Africa. I don't know. I'm not going to comment, but I'll show you some numbers later on. But the thought struck me that if some Umi decides to retire into his retirement village and he's got certain ICOM equipment, it's not the end of the world. You can use D-Star. It's not amateur radio as we knew it. Just as in the 1950s, single sideband was not amateur radio as it was known then. D-Star is a way of having QSOs and interacting with hams on the other side of the world. So this presentation really is there to illustrate what to expect if you persuade your ICOM equipment, you crank it into life on D-Star. I'm not going to go into the technicalities. There's some very bright radio hams out there who know about the technicalities. This is what are you going to do and what can you expect from the result? So it's not necessarily from a technical point of view. It's almost from a social point of view. What do you expect? So D-Star, just very, very quickly, this is a technology about 25 years old. It was a collaborative effort between ICOM and the Japan Amateur Radio League. to develop the protocol. Don't ask me about the protocol. I'm just a simple plastic salesman. I'm not technical. I have no qualifications in computing, electronics, or radio or communications technology. But I know it's a protocol. As we move into this presentation, we need to understand that D-Star is just one of a number of digital voice modes that are available to the radio ham. Probably the best known of the lot is DMR, which originated with Motorola many years ago. And I sit and look at the DMR WhatsApp groups, and my eyes roll back into my head when I hear of code plugs, time slots, and what is it? Color codes. Oh, that sounds exciting. So there's DMR, quite popular. There is YSF, which is Yaesu System Fusion, which is another proprietary technology aligned to Yaesu radios. And there are others as well. There's something called P25. I wouldn't be able to recognize P25 if I ran into it in broad daylight. But there's lots of these digital voice modes. And I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of the different modes. Let us go back and say, this presentation is for guys who have got ICOM radios, who are stuck in homeowner association housing developments. You can't put as much as a bent pin out of the window before you have the committee knocking at your front door. It's for those guys who have moved into houses or have had high noise levels superimposed upon them, so they can't use conventional RF technology. So it's ICOM. ICOM is D-Star. Well, I say ICOM is D-Star. ICOM is, or D-Star is 95% ICOM. I'll come back to that. So these are the sort of radios that you see that have D-Star capability. There's a 7100 there. There's a 9700 there. That one in that corner, that's an interesting radio. That's a 9100. That's the DC to light radio from ICOM of about 15 years ago. And if you're extremely fortunate, guys, you will have a UT121 board, an ICOM UT121 board, which is a D-Star board that you retrofit into that radio, and it becomes D-Star capable. That one in that top corner, I think that's a 5100. This is an interesting one. This is an ICOM 705, and that's top band to 70 SEMS, also with D-Star facility. There are a bunch of ICOM handhelds that also have D-Star facilities. I will get pilloried for my next comment, but over the years, I've had a few handheld radios, and I must say, I've always regarded them as a bit of a toy. You know, you want a real radio, not something that slips out of your trouser pocket and loses itself in the chair. So I'm not a fan of the handheld, but there's a whole suite of Icom handheld radios that are D-Star capable. Now we get really quite interesting. I tried to do a bit of market research on how many D-Star radios might be out there, D-Star capable radios out there. And I talked to a number of people, and you can imagine who I've talked to. But I've talked to a number of people, and we threw out a few numbers and bounced them around. And you know what struck me when I looked at the numbers that I was getting back, how popular the IC 7100 is. Enormously popular radio. And the view was, the consensus was, that there were possibly 200 of those radios out there. The 9700, of course, is the dedicated VHF, UHF, SHF radio from Icom, been around since about 2018. And I've got one of those here in Edenvale. And it's here purely because of its D-Star capability. The 9100 with, and I mentioned it already, the UT121 board, that's D-Star capable. I was surprised that the view was there are not so many of those around. Quite an expensive radio in its day, and that probably contributes to the few that we think are circulating around. The 705 is quite a popular radio. A lot of guys are using that for portable work. I was surprised that the consensus was only 25. I would have felt there were more of those 705s around. But that's D-Star capable. Those of you with long dollars, there's the 905. I'm not aware of any 905s in the country, but by the time you take a 905 and add to it its optional 10 gigahertz transverter, you're talking stratospheric numbers of rands. You have the ID 5100, the ID 4100. Those were real thumbsucks as to how many of those rigs are around in South Africa. And then you have the handhelds, the 5051 series and the 1991 and 92 series. And there, I think the market has tended to move towards Chinese handhelds as opposed to ones coming out of the big three. But there the Icoms have got D-Star. Also, it's worth pointing out the Kenwood came out with a handheld transceiver, the TH74, and more recently the TH75D, which are D-Star enabled. So they've got, I think, 2 meters, 70 SEMS, and D-Star, but at a price, not cheap. Not cheap radios. Lovely radios, not cheap. Is spending a lot of money on a handheld. And then finally, Flex, out of the southern states. Flex are D-Star capable with a USB digital voice dongle. So that's the sort of pool of equipment that I'm looking at here. Okay, so you have a radio with D-Star, and one Pete in the next street has also got a radio with D-Star on it. How do you do it? How do you talk to each other? Well, the simplest way to do that is, guess what? Do it simplex. And you switch both radios to DV, which means digital voice, which is D star. You select a common frequency. You select a common frequency, and I think 145,670 is often touted, and you call. There is no point calling CQ. Nobody would recognize the signal if they heard it. So you set up a SCED, and you arrange to meet on 145,670. And I've had a couple of QSOs here from Edenvale. Remember my noisy environment. I've had a D-Star, simplex D-Star QSO with ZS6 GAV, and a simplex D-Star QSO with ZS6 OB on the eastern side of Pretoria. And it works. It's fine. But, if you tune down the band, you won't hear anybody calling CQ on D-Star. All you hear is a data stream. And unless you have an extremely powerful brain, you will not be able to decode that data stream. Then you have local repeater mode, which you don't use, which means you would win no friends by trying to get into the Sandton analog repeater on 145,700. Well, you wouldn't be able to get into it anyway because you don't have a tone, an access tone there, so you don't use that. The other way you use it is you use digital repeater mode, DR. And there is a digital repeater here in Sandton. Out on 145.5875, in on 144.9875, and it works in a mode known as local CQ mode. So you set your rig up, and I'll come back to that, setting the rig up. You set the rig up and you call CQ on the Sandton digital repeater. And some of you will have seen on the Sandton and West Rand Club WhatsApp groups, I come on and say, is there anybody around? I'd like a QSO. And I have to say, I have had a number of QSOs across Johannesburg on that local CQ mode. And it works well. The final use, or the final way to make a D-Star call is, and now we're going to bend your mind a bit, we're going to use a reflector. A reflector. What on earth is a reflector? So, the linking to a reflector is one of the big attributes of D-Star. And the first thing you do is you register your call on the D-Star website. It's quite easy. There's no rocket science involved. You register your call sign. And that's it. Once you've registered your call sign, it's never another issue. I registered, I guess 2 years ago, and that's it. Now you have to get into the internet. And this is where all the old boys are sitting there with folded blankets over their knees, drinking hot chocolate and saying, oh, but it's not amateur radio. Well, it is, because the environment has changed. The environment in which we try and pursue our hobby has changed from being relatively noise-free and relatively antenna-friendly. It's changed. So what you do is you get into the internet from your radio. And there are two ways of doing this. You use a repeater. And the repeater you use in the Joburg area is the Sandton D-Star repeater. However, that repeater right now is not linking to the internet. And I think that's a short-term issue, and I'm sure it will be sorted out. So what you do is you point your antenna, or if you've got a vertical, I haven't got a vertical here, I've got a horizontal beam. I turn my beam towards the Sandton D-Star repeater. I think it's at the South African Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and I can trigger that repeater. So I go in via a repeater, or you use a little box called a hotspot. A hotspot is the size of a matchbox, and it's got a little aerial sticking up the side. And this is your interface into your Wi-Fi system, and from your Wi-Fi system into the internet. So my virtually all hotspots, you transmit to them on 70 SEMS, very low power. I mean, I run out of my 9700 here, I run about 0.75 watts, and the antenna is a 4-inch bit of wire sticking out of the 70 SEM antenna socket, and my hotspot is about 10 meters away inside the house, within easy range of my house Wi-Fi. And I found that's quite important. I'll come back to that. I bought my hotspot from a guy in the Cape, and they get sold on a commercial basis. There was a set of basic setup instructions there in it. And when all else fails, Google is your friend. And you set up your hotspot. So you transmit on 70 SEMS from your hotspot to your hotspot from your radio. And then the hotspot accesses your Wi-Fi and gets you into the internet. There are a number of reflectors around the world, and all they are really is just servers. And there are hundreds of them, literally. There's dstarinfo.com. You go onto that website and you will see the lists of reflectors. And you can visualize a reflector, and this is My God, the purists will turn in their graves when I say visualize it as a frequency where you meet somebody. So this reflector is an internet space where you meet other radio hams. You can almost regard it as a chat room where you meet other radio hams. As I say, there are hundreds of them. You program the reflector that you want to get into from your radio. I'm not going to go into the programming of your radio in this presentation. All I can suggest is you read the manual. It will have it in. ICOM manuals describe in excruciating detail how to program your radio. And the reflectors have numbers. By far, the most popular reflector is REF 001C. By far. REF 030C is also very popular. You will always find somebody to talk to on those reflectors. So you program your radio to get into REF 001C, and you ask the radio to link to REF 001C. The radio will talk back to you and say, I'm linked to REF 001C, and off you go. And you'll hear people talking to your absolute amazement. Your heart will be racing. When they stop talking, give your call sign. And to your utmost surprise, people will come back to you. It works. It's unbelievable. Just talking a bit about these reflectors, REF 001C is very international. Stateside, UK, early morning, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, at times, well, quite often, quite a lot of Japanese, obviously, ICOM comes from Japan. A lot of Japanese guys, they hang out on their own reflectors, all talking Japanese. I talked to one guy walking down the Ginza in Tokyo, talking into his watch. There's at least one guy in Korea that you'll come across regularly on. There's Germans on there. There's Holland's people. It's generally all in English. And the QSO is pretty much like, it takes the same form as the QSO that you're used to on HF. It's all about the same. You know, the name is Dick. The QTH is 10 kilometers east of downtown Johannesburg, and I had a fish curry for supper. It's a bit like that. Sometimes it can be a bit CB-ish, if you know what I mean. And I noticed it early on, and as I say, I've been on D-Star for about 2 years. I noticed it early on, but it's less in your face now. What you do get is the guy who talks, and then suddenly stops talking. And you think, and now? Has he disappeared, or has he put it back to me? So you get a bit of that. So you've got to be a little bit wide awake. When we say it's very international, it's never, in my view, so busy that you can't have a rag chew. I was talking to a guy in upstate New York about a week ago, and we were doing the full tutti from racing laser dinghies to all sorts of things. And we must have gone on for 20 minutes, and we finished off, and a guy broke in and he said, "Guys," he says, "that was really interesting. I really enjoyed listening to you." So it's not so busy you can't have a rag chew, which is quite nice. Generally, it's 3-minute overs. I set a time. I've got a timer in the 9700, which beeps to me, and that tells me when to finish off and put it back to the next guy. Then, and now we're going to move into pure wizardry here. There are a series of reflectors prefixed not with REF, but with XLX. XLX. And some of these reflectors are set up to transcode. Now, there's an interesting word for a Wednesday evening. To transcode into DMR or YSF. DMR or Yaesu system fusion. We have a transcoding reflector here in South Africa, and it is called XLX 655 Delta. XLX 655 Delta. And when it's working, and I'll come back to that, you call on XLX 655 Delta, and by this wizardry, you come out on DMR in Brandmeester, and now I'm in foreign country, Brandmeester Talk Group 655, which I think is the general South African talk group on DMR. That reflector is a bit up and down. At one point, July, August, September last year, it was working quite well. And I had lots of transcoded QSOs with the DMR fraternity, to the point that they shouted at me because I didn't have a DMR ID number. So it went off just as you go off and get a D-Star registration, you go off and you get a DMR ID number. Then that reflector, there was a problem with it. It came back briefly about 2 weeks ago. I know the guy who owns or looks after or is the custodian of that reflector, and he told me at the time he had a problem with what was it, with some sort of corruption in the software there. It's all software driven, but I've also worked XLX reflectors in Rhode Island, which transcoded into YSF, and I had a very nice reception there. And I've worked an XLX reflector in central England, which also transcoded into DMR. There's lots of them around. I mean, you can play for hours working out where your signal is going to pop up. So that's reflectors. Some other stuff. I believe you should keep the mic gain down. On my ICOM 9700, if I'm working sideband or FM, analog FM, I would run the microphone gain at about 30%. Um, on D-Star, I back it down to 10%, and it seems to be fine. So you don't need so much mic gain control. When the guy puts it over to you, count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Count to 5 before pressing the PTT and going back to him. Reception is, in my experience, it's probably 80% of the QSOs are absolutely armchair copy, as we would say, but seriously armchair copy, to the point where you sit back, put your feet up on the operating table, and you're talking to the guy on the other side of the table. 80% of the time. Sometimes you get some bit error rate or bit loss, which causes a bit of breakup of the signal. And there they call it, colloquially, they call it R2D2 speech. And it sounds very distorted and broken up. It happens, not often. I found that my incidence of R2D2 speech dropped hugely if I moved the hotspot out of my office here and moved it into the house. And obviously I got a better connection into the Wi-Fi, and the R2D2 dropped dramatically. Occasionally you get a loss of signal. The guy doesn't come back to you, and he disappears. Not often, but it happens. But the reception 80% of the time is perfect, and it really becomes your window out onto the world. It's really quite interesting. I talked briefly about that reflector XLX655D, and hopefully its owner will crank it back into life, and then quite nice, then you can talk across the whole of South Africa on DMR talk group 655. Then there's another thing you can do, that you can, with D-Star, you theoretically, and I use that word very carefully, you can theoretically access distant gateway repeaters. So if a repeater, for example, in the south of England is linked into the internet, you can call it up on D-Star from your radio and call CQ. And the repeater will put out a CQ call. I've accessed a number of repeaters in the UK this way. When I wrote this presentation, I was up to 2, Bletchley Park, north of London, and Herne Bay, which is the ICOM head office. And I've accessed their 70 SEM and 2-meter repeaters, but I haven't had a QSO yet. That might be just a function of the time of day and when I've actually got it going. But theoretically, I've done it. I had to do a lot of reading. I had to do quite a lot of internet searching, but you should be able to do it. Reading matter. If you have for example, an ICOM 9700, D-Star is touched on very briefly in the basic manual. You then have to download or go on the website and look at the advanced manual for D-Star. and you better settle in for the evening. There are pages and pages of diagrams and instructions. Frankly spoken, a bit overpowering. I cannot comment about the D-Star instructions in any other ICOM rig, but with ICOM 9700, oh, it's hard work. There are two books that are available fairly readily through Amazon. They're both written by a New Zealander called Andrew Barron. And the first one that I'd like to draw to your attention is Work the World with D-Star. And so this book, it's different from a manual. The manual tells you what happens if you press that button or twiddle that knob. This book says, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to connect to a linked repeater somewhere else in the world. This is how you do it. So there's a slight change in emphasis. That book, Work the World with D-Star, it has all the theory behind the D-Star modulation. It draws comparisons between D-Star and the other digital modes, such as DMR and YSF. It's a good book. And if you're serious about D-Star, get it. I've also got the book on the ICOM IC 9700, which has a fairly substantial chapter on D-Star in it. And again, it's different from the manual. The manual will tell you what happens if you press that button. The book will tell you why you need to press that button and how you press the button. In addition to those books, there is an overwhelming amount, a number of internet articles and YouTubes on the detail of setting up any particular rig. There's lots of stuff out there, and it's just a matter of plodding your way through it. So, you've resurrected your ICOM 7100. You've cranked it up onto D-Star. What can you do? Well, your lovely wife can sit inside and say yes and say yes to the dress on TV in the comfort of her own lounge. You, on the other hand, can sit in your shack and you can rag shoot with some old boy in Idaho on all sorts of different issues. Those are radio hams out there. They have the same background as us. They have the same training as us. There's quite a lot of old boys out there, so they're only too happy to go teary-eyed and reminisce about Collins equipment. So, in the comfort of your own shack, deep in suburbia, free from noise, with either a hotspot or a small antenna accessing the local D-Star repeater, you can open up your window on the world. Thank you very much for the monologue, listening to the monologue. And I'll see you on the 001 Charlie. That's a very interesting question. I mean, I've seen some graphs that you can download from Log for Old Men, and they extract the data. And I mean, by far, the most popular mode is FT8. I mean, it's just by far. But if you ever want to see ZS6BUN's eyes glaze over at 11 o'clock at night, it's him sitting on 40 meters or 20 meters, mouse in hand, just clicking and clicking and clicking on FT8 after FT8 after FT8. Enormously popular. Make no mistake. D-Star, I think, has a very particular niche. And that's why I came into this presentation, not from the technicalities, but from the social implication to the radio ham of the changing environment. The environment changing from the point of view of local noise, and the environment changing from the point of view of the dreaded homeowners association. There will be a niche for this sort of stuff. I mean, really, it's far more interesting to talk to somebody, in my view, than to click a mouse. Look, I was a big digit. I've had plenty of FT8 QSOs. I've had plenty of Q65, MSK 144, PSK 31, RTTY. In the 60s, I had a love affair with a teletype teleprinter. But for communication and the social satisfaction of talking to somebody, that's where I think D-Star comes in. Yeah, obviously you need a rig, an ICOM rig that is D-Star capable, and then you've got to have some form of getting into the internet. And one is, of course, the hotspot, and providing the link into the internet is good on that repeater, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be. Then that should get everybody going. As soon as I know that that's happened and that it's working, I'll tell you, I'll be on the Sandton Club's WhatsApp group and the West Rand's WhatsApp group and saying, I'm available for QSOs. I think about £2,000. I seem to remember paying about £2,000 for mine. I mean, if you look at it, when it arrives, it comes in this big cardboard box, and the thing the size of a matchbox falls out in amongst all the plastic packaging. You think you don't get much for your money, but that's about what they cost, I think. But shop around. I mean, there's this guy in Cape Town, he sells them. I suppose if you're feeling adventurous, you can buy them direct from overseas. I'm sure Anton at Giga also sells them. I think lots of guys sell them, frankly. Well, I think that's an excellent question. This presentation, I guess, was a little more focused on the guys that had ICOM radios, that were D-Star capable. I mean, to go out and buy a brand new ICOM 9700 just for D-Star, I would say that you have to have a very understanding wife. DMR radios are much cheaper. Some of them are much cheaper. Then, you would have to compare a DMR handheld, for example, with an ICOM ID52. ID52 would be more expensive, but I see these Anytones, these swanky Anytones with screens that my poor old eyes, I wouldn't be able to see them. But there's so much information on them. I think those rigs are a bit cheaper. I would say, frankly spoken, if you are a new radio ham and you want to go into digital communications like this, then DMR will be an easier entry on the pocket. It might be, and watch the flames come across your screens here, it might be a challenge to your mental faculties. It looks complicated because it is complicated, because it was never designed for ham radio use.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the presentation. Then, Dick, I see that Brian has posted hotspots are available from China for around several hundred rand in kit form for around 400 to 500 rand. So there's another option for those that buy their products from China.
Yeah, you just have to do some very, very simple assembly to match the Pi Star board with the baseboard. It's very simple, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Dick. Then I'd like to just say from our side, Dick, just before we knock off, that there are some upcoming presentations, and you've mentioned DMR. So those who are interested in DMR, there is a DMR presentation on the 25th of March. So put that in your diary for the Power Tech Talk on 25 March. The next Power Hour Talk we have will be on the 25th of February, and that'll be covering contesting and logging. So all those are very interested in contesting or logging or learning a few more about it, please join us in February on the Power Hour Tech Talk. Then we have a few other interesting ones for the next few months. 160-meter top band. Now, you know that the top band competition is in the SARL Diary of Events. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about how to get into 160-meter or improve your 160-meter transmissions or top band, diarize the 29th of April for that. Now, Dick, I'm not sure if your hotspot will allow you to get on 160 meters. I'm just kidding. But your farm might.
Oh, yes. I'm on 160.
Okay. And then the NFED half-wave antenna, which is a very common and popular antenna. For all those that want to learn a little bit more about the NFED half-wave antenna, pros and cons, please join us in May for the NFED half-wave antenna. And with that, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Dick for taking the time out of his diary and preparing that presentation for us. Dick, I echo what Philip was saying. I think it would be wonderful for Radio ZS as well if you can consolidate that into Radio ZS. Using one of the AI tools might easily do that for you using your slides as a base as well. But I'd like to say on behalf of all the participants, I think we had 28 participants monitoring, Dick, and listening to your presentation out of interest in terms of D-Star. I have learned a lot personally, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for your time, Dick.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Have a very good evening.
Thank you, Dick, and good night to everybody. We'll see you at the next Power Hour Tech Talk. This is ZS6HI signing off on the Power Hour Tech Talk.